Okay, so we'll get started. Welcome to the 6th edition of the Josh Chat, Job Search Online Hangout. My co-host today is Marc Miller, who's the founder of Career Pivot, which I think you say on your site that you're a career designer for baby boomers. Fair to say?
Yeah, basically. I've now transitioned to those in the second half of life.
Okay, yeah, right. And so Marc has written a book called Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. And actually, I like that. I like that that you put your own spin on with that term there. We'll get into that a bit. And so thank you so much for co-hosting with this call. I really appreciate having you here from Mexico.
That's right. You know, I just got off my Monday morning Zoom call where we were discussing how we're all going to survive this pandemic. And not
Is it
crazy.
specifically for job seekers, or is it a more general call?
It's for anyone.
Okay.
And the reality is we're all, well, everybody in the world is pretty much locked down. And how are we going to cope with that? Because it's not going to go away anytime soon.
And it may come back. In other words, like there are some who are saying that this is going to be like the flu, where every year we're going to have to deal with it again on some level. But hopefully that's a nightmare scenario that we're not going to see come to reality. So okay, so we have on the line with us so far. We have Daniel, who is in Jerusalem. Thank you, Daniel, for coming and welcome. And as the call goes on. And people join, people tend to come and go. So I'll welcome people on the call. And also occasionally people send in messages. Sometimes people don't want to appear on the video. They just send in messages. And so I'll keep an eye on that. People may send in questions and stuff like that. And so great. So let's get started. As I always start off by throwing the floor open to any visitors. And so Daniel, as the first visitor, do you have any questions, or should I start with a question?
I'd just like to say, since I'm the only one on the call at the moment, I'm looking, I guess, to transition to a new career. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I had my own practice for the last 10 years. And Mr. Miller, I made Aliyah. I moved to Israel about 1.5 years ago, pursuing my dream to live here. And I've been looking, I wanted to get at least a good solid year in Ulpan, in Hebrew learning, right? Because I really want to get into society. I don't want to stay in the English world as much as possible. So now I'm starting to look at the past few weeks, month really, to look for jobs. I have a few ideas. I've been talking to a bunch of people, and I'm all ears. You know, your suggestions are most welcome, but I really feel like I don't want to continue to be a lawyer. I don't want to be an Israeli lawyer. I'm a licensed California lawyer and a federal lawyer, but I really would like to get into something else. But if it's legal related or something very interesting, I'm open to just about anything, really. But
yes. So what are you thinking of? What ways, should say, what direction have you thought of so far?
What I'm looking at initially is a few things: the customer success, customer service, account management, that type of thing. And those positions vary. You know, different companies have very different roles, right? But basically, customer success. Another one is content writing. What they call content. I haven't looked for a job in 10 years, so it's a whole new ball game. Plus, in a different country. But content writing, marketing writing. The people here suggested that because as a lawyer and an intense practice, we're ultra communicators, writing and communicating all the time, and they think that this is a very good skill and a good place to start with a good company. And they'll see you and you develop into other areas and whatnot. It goes into marketing, it goes into customer relations, it goes into all kinds of things, right? also some type of legal related field. Doesn't have to be law necessarily, but it could be in business development or some type of sales or these types of things where negotiation, contracts, business savvy, and a legal background comes in handy, right? A couple more things just real quick. She asked me to mention this, and yes, is it like what do they call this? I guess an administrative position, and it could be business leads into sales, customer service. It could be managing people. She's like an administrative position, because as a lawyer and running my own firm, we have many hats, right? And she said that there's a need for administrative positions, a variety of administrative positions, and these types of things.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. When you were in the US, did you have your own firm, and for how long?
Yes, I had it for about 10 years. A litigation, labor law, workers' comp, defense-oriented firm.
Okay. One of the things that you're going to have to do is convince somebody that you can be an employee. That's one of the biggest challenges when you come from working for yourself. And by the way, I know a lot of folks have had their own business and they suck being employees. It's not that they're bad people. They're just not good at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so one of the things you need to determine is how much freedom do you want? So one of the things I heard from you was the content marketing, content writing. My guess is your way in there is not to try and get a job, is to try and get some contract work. If you'll listen, I'll go find it while we're on here. I have a podcast episode with my co-author, Susan Leahy. And Susan came out of the journalism world. She was a writer for the Kansas City newspaper. And she eventually, and right now, she lives in Portugal right now. And one of the ways she had to learn how to pitch herself was she knew how to tell people stories. And so one of the things is find good content marketers and find out whether that's a good fit. And the key piece there is content marketing and content generation for what? My guess is you're probably pretty knowledgeable in the legal realm. I would start looking to say, who blogs on that? Who's generating content? And it doesn't have to be in Israel, right? Right now, Susan's in Portugal. She's working for a Norwegian company. She's working for clients back in the US. She's got business all over the world. And so that's one of the nice things. But the first step is to get your foot in the door. Yeah. And the first thing is to find people who are willing to talk to you to find out, okay, how the heck do I do this?
Okay.
Particularly if you can find people who, content marketers who are former lawyers, because they'll tell you how they did it.
Okay.
Now, I suspect that's not hard to find, because almost in the US, over half the people who have law degrees are not working in the legal world. So there are a lot of folks out there. What you want to do is find someone, I like to find someone who looks, tastes, and smells like you, and say, how did you get to where you are?
Okay.
And my guess is initially it's not finding a job. My
Yeah,
sister,
Daniel, don't try to take notes for everything because you can just listen to the recording afterwards.
Okay.
but
Okay.
that's the key piece here is I have a whole chapter in my book on MSU disorder, and MSU stands for make stuff up. Uh, don't say, because the transition you're probably going to make is what I always claim is I want you to make a half-step transition, which is probably using your legal knowledge and your industry knowledge, and then saying who needs that, but not in the realm of being actually a practicing lawyer. And that's where, and then find people who are actually doing it, and then say, how the heck did you do that?
Yeah, I want to back up everything he said. I agree with all the points Mark made. I just want to add a few things in, just take a step back first. I want you to appreciate, Daniel, that what you're trying to do, it's not easy, okay? First of all, you're trying to make a career change, which is not easy in and of itself. Actually, I can even go a step earlier. You're trying to look for a job, which is not easy. You're trying to do that in a new career, which is another level of complexity. And you have just moved to recently you've moved to a new country with a new mentality, new culture, and you're trying to do all those things in there as well, okay? That's a tall order. It's not impossible by all means, of course not. Many people will manage to do it and have done it, and you're going to do it as well. But it's a lot, okay? It's not easy, okay? So just cut yourself some slack if it takes longer than you think it might take, okay? That's one thing to keep in mind as you go. Another thing, I just want to fine tune something that Mark said, which right at the end is that, yeah, I really like this idea of finding someone who did what you want to do and then try to basically copy them until you discover your own voice or your own way of doing things. If you decide to go the content marketing route, trying to find jobs or project work and contract work that's on freelance marketplaces or wherever, that'll force you to look at what's in demand. And it'll also force you to realize, do I actually like doing this without making the whole commitment of an entire job search for a job that you might not like in the end, or even getting a job and then discovering you don't like it. So I think it's a really, really good tip that shouldn't be underestimated, how valuable it is there, like how much you can learn so quickly by just following up on that. It's very possible that you'll spend a little bit of time, do a few writing projects, then discover, you know what, it's just not for me. I'm more of a visual person than a writing person, and that's great. I mean, again, it could be a similar legal adjacent to something else, but maybe in a different medium. What's fine, but at least you'll get cracking, and you'll discover fairly quickly whether that is the right thing for you, or should you adjust your course. So yeah, again, completely back up everything that Mark said.
I think my personality and my aptitude is more customer success, customer account management oriented. I like to collaborate. I love people, and I'm comfortable with people from all walks of life. I'm really interested in people. I enjoy that. I like working as a team. I also like to be by myself sometimes and churn out the work. But I like the collaboration, the camaraderie, that stuff. And it looks like there's a broad variety of duties in that position. Some are more technical, which would be outside of my realm, really, coding and these types of things, right? But there's a lot of customer relationship building, a long-term approach, and I think I'm pretty good at that. I enjoy that, relating to customers, providing them value, helping make their product better, our services better, right? Getting all that, and dealing with the salespeople and other departments. I think I could be good at that. I don't know. I haven't done that, but I think that's more in my line with my aptitude. That's my first choice. Something like that.
One of the things that you're going to have to watch out for is the fact that sales, particularly relationship sales, at least in the US, is a dying profession. In other words, we have moved to more and more online sales. I mean, it used to be the account manager. The account manager would come in and talk to you and teach you about the product and develop that relationship. Now what happens is people get online, they look up, they get 80% of the way to the buying decision before they even talk to somebody. That's why we've got ClickFunnels and we've got just I'll use the example. I was when I was back in Austin, Texas, I had a client who had come in, and I got her all the way to the top of Keller Williams. Keller Williams happens to be headquartered in Austin, Texas. I got her all the way to the top, and she was 65. She had tons of background, and they didn't even want to talk to her. Because it was all analytics. It was completely analytics. They don't talk to people anymore. And so one of the things that you have to do initially there in Israel is understand the sales culture. You really need to spend some time because sales in every culture is different.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't take what you know about how you think it was in the US and then translate it there to Israel. That's very, very dangerous. So the key piece is finding some folks who are doing the account management for the products that you know something about. Because there are two sides to this. There is the account management customer success side, and the other side is the industry knowledge. Now, by the way, the industry knowledge is usually the thing that's the easiest thing to pick up. By the way, that's what everybody looks at first. It's stupid, but that's what people do. I've done this with product managers, project managers. They'll always look and say, do you have the industry skills? So you will have to understand it's both the product category and the business of account management. So if you can find someone, so let's use an example. Maybe you're going to do business development for a law firm. That might be a good entree into managing, because you understand lawyers. Now, the key piece is the legal profession in Israel similar to what you've dealt with in the U.S.?
I think here, maybe you could address this better, but I think here, because the economy is so small, there's about 8 million people here.
Yep.
And it's in some ways, it's up to European standard of living in some areas and almost American in some areas. But overall, the economy is relatively small. It's mainly an export-oriented economy.
Yeah, I can believe
That's what I'm thinking. And I think, right, so the companies are, especially these high-tech companies, and the big industry here is high-tech and related fields.
Yeah.
They're dealing with abroad, by and large.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to be dealing with, I imagine, customers and the clients in Europe, North America, and Asia, primarily. I don't know, but that seems to be the case.
Okay. You made a couple of used a couple of words. I think and I imagine. Both of those are dangerous words to use. Okay? Because what you think is unimportant and what you imagine is unimportant. What it is you need to go do your homework.
Yeah.
Because I'll use the example. I spent a lot of my career in high-tech learning and development. Back in 2002, I had a near fatal bicycle accident. I hit a car head on at 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
And I recovered. And by the way, my very first trip was to train Huawei in Shenzhen, Guangdong province in November of 2002, which by the way, was the epicenter of SARS. So I had a big wake up moment. And I said, after that, I'm going to go teach high school math. I'm going to go teach high school. My son had graduated from high school, was off to college. My first tech startup had left us debt free. So I'm going to go teach high school math. And I was an engineer. There was a shortage of math teachers. I've been training adults in 40 different countries for about 20 years. They'll want me. I knew that. You know what? No, they didn't. They didn't want any guy over 40. I made stuff up. They don't want guys over 40 because, by the way, we don't do what we're told. And I have tons of stories of how I ignored every sign that they didn't want me. And there were sign after sign after sign that just kept popping up. And I said, no, and so I did end up getting hired, but it was a very painful process. And I only lasted 2 years because I made stuff up. So at this point, what you need to do is, like I say, take a direction. Say, I want to do customer success. I want to do account management. Give yourself a defined timeline, a period to do market research. Is it 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? That's going to be based on your finances. And then start really do your networking and getting out and talking to people and find out, does this make sense?
Yeah, I think that you really want to make sure that you're considering qualifications as well. Like, don't.
Yes.
Going back to what I was saying earlier, I don't overcomplicate things. It's already hard enough. If you're going to be reaching for something that sounds really appealing, but you're almost completely unqualified for, it's a big reach. It's a big ask. So try for something that, okay, fine, you don't want to be a lawyer anymore, great. But if it's something that's as close as possible, where you can leverage as many of the qualifications you already have, then it won't be so hard to convince people that you can pull it off, especially if it's things that you did, maybe not full-time, but things that you did as part of having your own firm for 10 years. I mean, there's a lot of achievements there to point back to, and you want to use that as much as possible. So you got to be careful. You really do need to be careful. And I would do the networking. I mean, from day one, like that's got to be part of your research, is talking to people as much as possible, learning from people. You're going to learn all the things that Marc talked about, the culture, the different kinds of culture, where there are opportunities, which qualifications people think that you should have, even if you think that you don't need them. Again, what you think doesn't really count for much. It matters what other people think more, because they're the ones who are going to decide whether to hire you or not, or even just to forward your information onto somebody else who could hire you or not. So yeah, there's a lot of learning there, but you've never had as much information at your fingertips. Not only in the sense that you can go on LinkedIn, look for people who have the California bar like you do and are now in Israel, and that alone is a great jumping off point to find people locally who you can talk to. All right. Secondly, in terms of the current corona situation where everyone's in isolation, that means that people are more available than they've ever been theoretically, which is also a great time to be reaching out to people. So again, that's something that you definitely want to take advantage of more than at other times. If everyone was stuck at work and you couldn't reach people, maybe then you would be focusing on different things. But definitely do your networking as soon as possible.
Okay, great.
Okay, I just posted in the chat box a interview I did with Gary O'Neill a little while ago. And Gary is he's a great guy. He's a good friend. He's a recruiter in Austin. He has his own recruiting company. But one of the things he talked about was creating your career story. And you've got to be able to target it. And the key thing is, what do you include and what do you leave out?
Mm-hmm.
My suspicion is you got a lot of stuff in your career that you are really proud of.
Yeah.
That you just simply have to stop talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. I've been redoing my resume.
So counterintuitive. It's
Yes.
true.
Well, the fact is, a lot of hiring managers are looking for your career trajectory, and it's supposed to go like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality for most of us is it does. It does, right? And it's how to take your story and make it look like this.
Yeah.
This is particularly important when you're trying to make these kind of transitions. And if you can make that transition look smooth, and a lot of that is not talking about stuff. Like Gary talks about, he started his career at NASA. He was a software developer, shooting off, the Apollo spacecrafts. And he says he's been the last 20 years, he's been an entrepreneur. So if he talks about that at all, he talks about the teams he built rather than anything about the fact that he was a software developer. Because and he has had a really good story about a gentleman who was a software. He was looking at a software testing job, and it was they were having problems. It was a software company that wrote software for the pharmaceutical industry, and their challenge is they were heavily regulated, and it was a very, very tedious, methodical, filling out forms, following procedures, which, by the way, a lot of quality assurance people aren't good at, which is why they were having problems. And this guy comes along, and his background was in quality assurance, but having to deal with building fighter planes. He knew, that, when rivets had to be put in, that bolts had to be torqued down to a certain level, and he could go, and he had to fill out detailed paperwork. And the first time Gary submitted the guy to the hiring manager, hiring manager said, this guy doesn't know anything about software. But he had him recraft his story around the fact that it isn't so much he was a QA guy for fighter aircraft. He was a QA guy who knew how to be very, very methodical, how to take a very boring job and make it, for him, that was just fine. And he had to translate the story for the hiring manager, because the hiring manager is not going to be able to translate it for him.
Right.
So go listen to that. It's Gary tells it in a very interesting way, but that's the challenge that we have when we have been working for 30 years, and particularly if we've done a bunch of different stuff. What do we say and what do we leave out? I never talk about the fact that I spent years and years and years working for IBM as a software developer and a IT guy, and no one gives a crap anymore.
There's also the whole stigma of being overqualified and being rejected as overqualified. And if you
Right.
emphasize that you are overqualified by telling all of your achievements above and beyond, without, as you say, crafting a story that makes as targeted a sense as possible, then you're just opening yourself up to that rejection, unfortunately.
Yeah, Gary also had a story of a woman he was helping who had a very long experience doing event management. And the key piece was she'd done a lot of her event management were large international events. Well, the jobs she was applying to in Austin had no international component. Zero, zilch, none. Mm-hmm. But she still would talk about it. And the reality is people went and listened to, well, that sounds like it's real important to you. We wouldn't hire you. And she had to learn how to shut up about it.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, I had the same problem. I've got a vast international experience. When I left IBM, and I went for a first tech startup. They didn't care about that stuff. So I didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And
it's challenging. It's frustrating, isn't it?
You betcha.
Yeah.
So
It's
again,
a big part of you, and blood, sweat, and tears. And right, the ladies at Nefesh B'Nefesh, the government immigrant assistance program here, they're getting me to really think as you're saying. And we revised my resume several times, and they're forcing me into to have that mindset. What skills do your people that you're looking for jobs, what are they interested in? And what are they not interested in? Yes, yes.
okay. I also posted a second podcast episode. I did an interview with my co-author, Susan Leahy, because she's, again, it's a fascinating story she has of becoming a freelance writer.
By the way, I'll include the links in the video notes on YouTube afterwards.
Okay.
So don't have to worry about that.
So the key piece here is, and by the way, when you make these transitions, I won't say your resume is worthless, but it's not nearly as important. Because it's really tough to craft a resume for something that you haven't done before, and getting someone to pay attention. I had a podcast episode I did with Thea Kelly where we talked about career pivot resumes, and she talked about how to take the language from your old world and translate it into the language of your new world. But the reality is, if all you're going to do is apply for a job, that resume is not going to get it for you.
Right.
It's going to come from talking to someone who's going to pass you, say, this guy might be a good fit, someone who's willing to go back for you. But if you're just going to submit the resume, it's probably going to go into a black hole. Because you're a non-traditional job seeker.
Yeah.
And the application systems are built around traditional job seekers. Believe me, I've made 7 career transitions, which some people say I can't hold a job. And I did not go through a traditional job, particularly my 2 startups, my, getting into high school math, doing my nonprofit work. Not one of them was done traditionally. I got an in. I got someone who would be willing to talk to me. In fact, at my last tech startup, no one even looked at my resume. Basically, I had someone there say, you need to talk to Mark. So I went in, talked to the hiring manager, and after we'd been talking for half an hour, he says, you want to interview for the job? I said, okay. And they said, we're only paying $50,000. And I went, you ain't going to get anybody for that. Well, how much do you expect? And I told them what I made at my last tech startup, which was 5 years earlier. I said, but let's talk. It was completely non-traditional. It was all through relationships.
I'm hearing from people here that networking is a very, very big, and personal relationships very big. Well, I need to focus on that as well, big time.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that you have to understand is, and Jacob, chime in. Israel has, because a lot of the Israelis, they all came from someplace else. So my guess is you probably have it's a probably close-knit community, particularly from a business perspective. Does that Jacob, does that
Well, here you have, so it's true, like in the sense that you have on the one hand, there are many people who have moved here,
yes.
even in just the past few years. So just that alone is something that Daniel can leverage. And then in terms of the business communities, well, as Daniel was saying, so it's a small country that you can easily get into a situation where everyone seems to know everybody, or everybody seems to have been in the army together, and it can be a bit frightening if you weren't part of that group, and it may take you longer to break on through because you weren't there early on. But it can be done. There's no question. You just have to insist. You just have to keep going. I also had a couple of startups that I worked for. One is a co-founder, and one that I tried to start up my own. And this is going back to 2012 was the last time. And it took me a good 4 to 6 months before people started to recognize who I was in terms of just being in that industry. Nothing to do with job search. It didn't have anything to do with that. Just because I kept going to the same events, just seeing people again and again, saying hi, occasionally offering something, occasionally answering a question. And then little bit by little bit, people start recognizing you. And then, okay, they feel that you were always there. So it's just like any kind of relationship. It takes time to build. There's no question about it. On that note, we could keep going and going and going, and Mark has so many interesting things to say. But yeah, we gotta end it. We're already a bit over, but it's been great. So I just wanna first of all thank Mark for co-hosting this call.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. And again, I will have all the information about the podcast links that you shared, and also your website, and also your book. The book that you authored, it came out last year, about, again, Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. And Daniel, thank you for being our guest. And I think we may have given you so much information that you're chewing on it for a while, but you got your money's worth.
Great. I really appreciate your help. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm going to take this very seriously, very, very seriously, what you're saying. I really appreciate it.
Cool.
Fantastic. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to sign off now. And the recording will be up on YouTube, hopefully this week, ideally even tomorrow. But people will know. I'll be in touch, and you'll know. Thanks again, and I'm signing off now.
How do we find it on YouTube? How do we find it on YouTube? How do I find it on YouTube?
How will you find? Well, so I've been on my channel. I've been posting all the episodes, the previous episodes. But if Adina has sent you here, then she'll know. But again, I'll be sharing it. I'll be sharing it on my website and on my social media as well. And again,
what's your website? What's your channel? What's your website?
Oh, my website is JobMob, jobmob.co.il, and Mark's website is Career Pivot, careerpivot.com.
Okay, and yours is JOBMOB?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Right. Thank you very much. Again. Have a good day and a good evening. Goodbye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.